Hello, everybody. I'm Pasha Marlowe, and welcome back to the Neuroqueering podcast. I am here today, excited to bring you Matthew Zakreski. He is a doctor of psychology. I think not at all a boring podcast guest, which is one of the main reasons why I brought him on, because like me, he leads with vulnerability and humor. And has just a spirited way about him. So I appreciate it. I'm attracted to that kind of person. So he specializes in working with children and adolescents, as well as families, providing therapy and psychological evaluations, a consultant to schools, a professor, a researcher, with a specialty of giftedness. So welcome, Matthew.
Well, it is wonderful to be here, and please call me Dr. Matt. That's what everybody calls me.
Dr. Matt.
Yeah.
Great.
Easier, right? I mean, like, no one has to stumble across my ethnic last name that way.
All right, Dr. Matt.
Dr.
Awesome.
Matt.
Well, welcome, Dr. Matt. And I've watched several of your other podcast episodes and videos, and I appreciate how much vulnerability and creativity you bring to your talk. So thank you for that.
That means a lot. And I mean, similarly, bouncing that right back to you, I mean, there's a lot of podcasts out there, but I've rarely seen one that has like the authentic passion you have for this. I mean, it just bleeds through whatever medium you're watching this through. So it's like, you know, like I said, I'm attracted to that energy as well. So it's like, I feel like you and I are just going to just vibe, and it's going to be glorious, and we're going to change the world.
Let's do it. Let's change the world in the next 30 minutes. In a neurodiversity affirming way. And right before we talked, you were saying neurodivergent affirming. And I actually really appreciate that as well, because one of my maybe a pet peeve, I don't know, it's just something I'm trying to bring to this podcast in terms of the languaging around neurodiversity, is that neurodiversity is the diversity of all minds, right? But neurodivergent people, ADHD, autism, giftedness, trauma, all the things are divergent from the dominant norm. And so rather than neurodiverse individuals, we're neurodivergent individuals, part of a neurodiverse system or, species.
Yeah, that was recently made clear to me, actually by one of my colleagues, who explained it to me and then apologized for his pedantry. And I was like, wow, not only did you explain it, but you used pedantry correctly. Y'all are my people, right? I mean, that's good. I like words. Words are good. But yeah,
words are good. And words are powerful, because I mean, we can't really be a neurodiverse individual anyhow. And so it's interesting to me. So I appreciated when you said neurodivergent, because I think it's a word that isn't used enough when speaking about non-typical brains and minds, body minds. So you specialize in giftedness. And of course, I might be one of many people who, as soon as I hear that, think, ooh, like I initially had this sense of like, oh, is this like higher functioning, better, a more gifted, like a congratulations, your child is gifted. Oh, sorry, your child is autistic, like the difference between the two. And so I'm curious about, because I'm sure you've heard that before, how you define giftedness, and is it still in today's society inclusive enough and sensitive enough to privilege and, social injustice and racial inequities, and you know where I'm going. So tell me what you feel giftedness means.
So it is a complicated term, right? And there's a lot of baggage with it. And, and I think we have to embrace that if we are moving forward in a way that is unpacking the privilege that comes with any term, right? So, so I always say that my work in this field started with my own self, right? I'm a gifted kid. I also have ADHD, and I was identified gifted in second grade, as many kids are. And I say many kids are, with the necessary caveat that I'm the person that giftedness was built from, not for,
Okay.
but from.
Okay.
I'm an upper middle class white male from the suburbs,
Yep.
right? I was Johnny raise a hand, right? Like, I know that. I'll take that to the office. I'll do this. I'll do that. I'm a little teacher in the room, little playground senator running around, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And we have traditionally found gifted kids in those spaces. So over time, it became we looked for gifted kids in those spaces,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Several years ago, I had an opportunity to speak to the Philadelphia school district. I lived in Philly for many years, and I said, giftedness represents the top 2 percentile of learners, right? So it's an IQ of 130 or higher. That's the 98th percentile. So it's like, so just by the numbers, you guys should have X number of gifted kids. And you have a much smaller number than that, which
Mm-hmm.
means these kids are here. Statistically speaking, we
Mm-hmm.
know that they must exist. So
Mm-hmm.
where are they?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, I mean, we don't know where. I was like, no, it's not anybody's fault, but it means we're not looking for them the right way,
Right.
because there are multiple kinds of intelligence and
Yes.
that loads in multiple different ways. And if you're only looking for the kid who knows all the answers and raises their hand, you're only going to find that kid,
But if
right?
you define giftedness by the IQ alone, do you feel like IQ tests alone are inclusive and honor multiple intelligences?
IQ tests are a tool, and they're a necessary one, but they cannot nor should they be the only part of it,
Okay.
right? I have many colleagues who do more works in this, my colleague Scott Peters being a great example, but that we have to cast a wider net using different tools to find kids in different areas. One thing that have you ever seen the show American Ninja Warrior?
No, I've heard of it, but I've never
It's
seen
a
it.
great so if you ever watch it, one of the kinds of intelligence that exists is kinesthetic intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
sort of an awareness of your body in space. I don't know how great these people did in school,
Right.
but I can tell you, if you can fling yourself through the air 15 feet and catch a 2-inch platform with your hands and then swing yourself to the right to catch a different platform, that is a gift. That is
Yes.
giftedness. That is exceptional. That is top 2%. But there's no IQ test that measures that, right?
Right.
We
Right.
need to have people present themselves in their best for their best selves, right?
Yes.
And that requires meeting people where they are and listening to their stories and those stories,
Mm-hmm.
not just what we expect things to look like. And so, as in with any term, right, we have to unpack our implicit bias.
Yes.
And that's vital if we're going to be equitable, if we're going to be honorable and catch all the people, because every single person deserves the help they need. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
a neurodivergent person who
Mm-hmm.
comes from non-traditional means, then you are much less likely to be caught. Ergo, you are much less likely to get what you need, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then the system
Mm-hmm.
becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, you don't get the gifted services. You're underwhelmed in school. You stop trying. Therefore, it proves, giant air quotes, that you're not gifted. And that
Right. And somebody who's twice exceptional or like 2E or 3E, because
yeah,
didn't you one time you said 3E,
3E, yep.
gifted, neurodivergent, and queer? Was that the three? Or
That is queer is one of the common 3Es. It's any socially disadvantaged identity. So
okay.
someone could be 3E for race. They could be 3E for ethnicity. They could be 3E for native identity.
Okay.
And many of my colleagues, Christina Collins and Donna Ford being two of the eminent scholars in this area, I feel like I'm name dropping a lot, but they're just better at this than I am. And I don't want to, it's like citations in a paper, right? But
That's good.
they argue that people who come from low socioeconomic systems would also qualify as 3E because of this idea
Mm-hmm.
that you are coming from a much more disadvantaged place.
Mm-hmm. So do you
Right.
think the way the system is set up right now accommodates gifted students
Oh God,
properly? Okay.
not even a little
Okay.
bit.
Okay.
Uh,
And then when my older, they're now adults, my children, they were in the gifted and talented program. Is that still a term that's used? Gifted and talented? It just adds to the implicit bias
Right.
and
I'm
privilege.
not much better
You're
than
good.
you. Right.
You're smart and you're talented, unlike the other 98%. You're like, I just hated it all the time. So, and they were embarrassed by it
Oh,
in
yeah.
a way. Yeah.
And programs have moved. You'll see challenge is a thing that people use a lot.
Mhm.
They'll use advanced, which I hate that term.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, I tell schools, teachers, parents when we work with them that gifted education is special education, right?
Mhm.
Now,
Mhm.
in American society, that has a very particular vibe for being on the low end of the IQ spectrum, right?
Mhm.
But the idea is that it's tier 2 is strategic intervention and tier 3 is intensive intervention.
Okay.
We can just move them on the other side of the IQ spectrum.
Yes.
Intensive intervention for a gifted learner means that if you're in 6th grade and everybody else is learning multiplication and you're on multivariate calculus,
Right.
that's a kid who needs intensive intervention, right?
Right.
It's not about superiority, it's about giving people what they need.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'll be the first to acknowledge that this is a very challenging line to walk, right?
Yes.
Because there are things that gifted learners can do that their peers cannot do, right? I will own that. I totally with it. There are
Mhm.
also elements of being gifted that make gifted learners unable to do things that their peers can do or struggle with those things.
Right.
So it's about serving the whole person. And
Yes.
traditionally, gifted education has been about high level academics, intellectual challenge, and that's about it.
Mhm.
And now people are understanding that part of the gifted brain is a different brain than a neurotypical brain, which is
Mhm.
why giftedness has a seat at the table in the neurodivergent movement, right? That's
Got
like
it.
we belong here. We promise. There's the all sorts of brain studies I can show you. But the idea here is that because of how the gifted brain develops asynchronously,
Yes.
there are things that load into school systems that many teachers are like, oh, that's great. But there are also things about the gifted brain that load into a school system that make teachers go, oh, I hate
Right.
it. Right.
Right.
So it's that complexity that I advocate for, that the reason that this is not, it's not a gift to be gifted, as it were.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, because there might be this perceived competence in all areas if they're academically competent, and then they might struggle socially or with an executive functioning, but it's behind the scenes. It reminds me of uh as a girl and a woman with ADHD, that my hyperactivity is all internal,
Yeah.
in the ruminating thoughts and intrusive thoughts, and just my outward appearance was not hyperactive or traditionally ADHD. So if the struggles are internalized, then how can schools accommodate unless they're sensitive to that?
Right.
Yeah. And so you talked about reclaiming the word gifted, much like you mentioned, much like people have reclaimed the word queer. So I just want you to speak about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I remember growing up and hearing the word queer almost exclusively as a slur,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the famous line from Full Metal Jacket, like, only steers and queers come from Texas, and he did not mean that in an affirming way. He was not an ally in that
Yeah.
scenario,
Right.
right? And I can't help what other people know or think they know about the word gifted, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could make a very good argument it's not a great term. I would certainly
Mm-hmm.
be open to that argument. But as a piece of neurodivergence, right, what we're seeing is people understand that there is a lot more complexity to being gifted. There are challenges
Yes.
and strengths and likes and dislikes and poor fits with environment that are relevant and meaningful. So people are saying, like, I'm gifted and here's what I need, not
Yeah.
look how good I am because I'm gifted,
Right.
right?
Right.
And there are schools and districts that still hold it up that way.
Mm-hmm.
The kids who get the straight A's, the kids who volunteer for everything, you know,
Exactly.
and I would be wrong if I said those kids didn't exist, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the idea here is that the more neurodivergent a person is, the more support they need, and the less likely the system is to support them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing people reclaim the word gifted as this idea. It's like, I'm a gifted adult. I didn't stop being gifted when I turned 18 and I aged out of school. Just like you don't stop being autistic when you're 18. You don't stop
Right.
being queer when you're 18. Like, these are things that exist. They are part of ourselves. And you
Yes.
carry your brain with you wherever you go. So,
And is there, even in just the word gifted, but and gift is such a, positive, yay, a gift, it's a present. And it's like, it reminds me of, again, ADHD, where the word is deficit. And so it just already implies a problem and pathologizes it. And much like gifted already implies that you're just lucky. You're just so fortunate. And so is there a campaign to change terminology at all, or not really?
It bubbles up at basically every conference, and
Okay.
there are people who bang that gong. I think that as someone who studies the brain and works with brains a lot, I often say that I, especially in working with neurodivergent people,
Yeah.
and my specialty within that is giftedness, right?
Okay.
Because
Okay.
giftedness has a seat at the table there, and then I'm sort of covering both ends of that, because increasingly, the more we learn about the brain and then how much we learn about the gifted brain, there are elements to that neurology that come with inherent challenge. So
Mm-hmm.
it isn't as simple as giving a kid a stack of library books and patting them on the head and saying, go to Harvard, right? If that exists, my job wouldn't exist. And I like my
Right.
job. So
I want to keep my job, so stop challenging this. Yes. So, and I imagine there's a lot of misdiagnoses of autism,
oh Lord, yes.
right, and vice versa, right?
Yep.
And so, I'm curious, as because you do evaluations, what would be the defining aspects of autism versus giftedness?
Well, and that's actually a whole talk I give.
Oh,
And it's
good.
based on this idea. Are you familiar with the show Big Bang Theory?
I have seen that.
Yes, there we go. Like, we're just checking our pop culture boxes today.
Exactly.
Um, um, so Sheldon Cooper, the main character of the show, right?
Sure.
Um, Chuck Lorre, who wrote the show, has gone on record saying that Sheldon is not autistic. Right? He's like, I've
Interesting.
known many scientists. He's just like the scientists I knew. But Jim
Interesting.
Parsons, the actor who played Sheldon, has a sister who's autistic. And he's like, no, no, no. Sheldon is definitely autistic. Right. So if the writer and the actor who brought Sheldon,
Interesting.
right?
Yeah.
And if I went through a list of all the things the gifted brain has and a list of all the things the autistic brain has, you'd see there's a lot of overlap.
Yes.
In terms of neurotypes, they are very, very similar, with some pretty minute differences that many people are not trained to look for.
Mhm.
So I tell parents, like, if you go get an autism evaluation for your kiddo, make sure it includes an IQ test.
Okay.
Because just like you mentioned before, right, autism, like, oh, your kid's autistic, has this sort of low end special education, can't do it mindset to it. But if your IQ shows up in high levels in, let's say, spatial reasoning, right, then you're gifted in that area. Then you'd be a twice exceptional adult, right? You've got giftedness and
And
autism
autism.
combining in your brain, right? And you've got parts of that where it's harmonic and it's crushing it and it's awesome. And there are parts where it's like, oh, wow, this is going to be a challenge for me.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the neurodiversity movement
Mm-hmm.
is seeing those things either as positive or non-valued, right?
Okay.
So as a gifted kid with ADHD, I cannot tell you how many times I heard growing up, if you could only focus,
You
imagine
could
what you could do.
just apply yourself. Yeah.
Just apply yourself. And I say, like, God knew I would have been too powerful if I had executive functioning.
Head
That
would just be too big.
I would have taken things over. I would have been like Thanos, but on the good side of things. But the idea here is that, like, now the language we're hearing in schools from mental health professionals, from teachers, from administrators is, here's where you are. We'll get you where you want to go. And
Mm-hmm.
if that means a kid has executive functioning deficits, which come endemic to the gifted brain, to ADHD, to autism, right? There's a lot of executive functioning challenges in neurodivergent people.
Sure.
What that ends up looking like is sometimes kids need a lot of scaffolding and support. Sometimes they don't need it. Sometimes they only need it in very specific areas, right? But the idea here is that creativity and the individuality and the customization that you're seeing now means kids are getting what they need,
Yeah.
right? And it isn't this one size fits all, here's a planner, figure it out. Because I'm sure
Right.
you and I both got plenty of planners growing up.
Never used them, but yes, I
Never used
received them.
They're a lovely stack in the corner of my room.
Good for fire making and uh-huh.
Fire setting probably should be another podcast episode.
Right.
Oh my Lord. But I mean, that's the idea. It's like, it isn't as simple as here's a planner. It's about what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your interests? Let us build an executive functioning scaffold around that stuff, knowing that that's what's going to help you develop those skills in the most effective way.
Okay. Right. And I'm thinking about you as a gifted child with ADHD. And if you're, quickly able to catch on to concepts and you're maybe smarter than some of your teachers and you have ADHD and you crave, variety and novelty and you get bored easily and distracted easily, I can imagine that could show up as many challenges to focusing and attention in the classroom.
When someone gets bored easily in mainstream education, you are setting them up to fail because the American education system has a tremendous amount of redundancy built into it.
Right.
And it's done that way because it's based off the Industrial Revolution and the, conveyor belt system, right? Like, sure, for many neurotypical learners, they need to spend 6 months on addition and then spend the next 6 weeks of the next school year on addition to make sure they got it, because you want to catch everybody. I'm with it. Those 70% of kids in the middle of the IQ spectrum, by all means, that's what they need. But if that's not what you need, that's not what you should get. Right? If I took you out to dinner and you're allergic to soy, I'm not going to take you to a Japanese restaurant. That's just a bad idea. Maybe we go to like a place that has all sorts of different kinds of food, right? Or we find a restaurant that fits you. And so gifted learners are not asking for different things because they seek to be better or superior. They're asking for the things that they need because they are the things they need.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're
it's an accommodation.
It's an accommodation, right?
Yeah.
And one of my colleagues, Jim Delisle, he does an exercise where he has a room full of teachers. He says, all right, everybody say the alphabet, A through Z. And so everyone says the alphabet. He goes, great, do it again. So we all look at each other and we do it again. And he goes, do it a third time. And by the end of the third time, people are mad. Like, you would, a room full of compassionate, intelligent adults are like, I don't want to do this.
Wasted my time and energy.
My time, right? I took a professional development day for this, right? But that's just it. Like, if you can capture that feeling,
yes,
in just a 30-second exercise,
imagine
how that feels for an entire school year, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And there's an aspect to the neurodivergent mind that comes up when you say all this, which is that, and it feels reckless from a professional standpoint. So I'm wondering, so we can catch on to concepts very quickly with giftedness, ADHD, autism, I'm sure many other neurodivergencies as well. But there's this sense of, okay, I got it. And then, well, now I'm going to go implement it. And now I'm going to go teach it. And now I'm going to create a business out of it. Like I just learned it 30 minutes ago, but now it's my job. And so that aspect of us being able to quickly become proficient in an idea or concept and potentially then expand upon it or go teach it. Have you seen that with a lot of your clients? I know I see that often with my clients and in myself too. The ability to integrate a concept right away.
Right.
Yeah.
And
and
it's up to fail in two vital ways, because for the things that don't download immediately, clearly I can't do this, right?
Right.
Like, well, actually, hold on. Like, if you can stick with it, there's value to that. But also it sets us up for imposter syndrome, because it's like, I didn't do theater at all until high school, freshman year of high school.
Yeah,
And then I
I
fell in
knew
love
you were
with,
theater.
oh, I didn't know until I knew though, right? Because I mean, think about it. I grew up in suburbs of New Jersey in the 90s, right? The
Yeah,
only art we saw was professional wrestling. Let's be real, right? You know, like I knew Broadway was a thing. It was in New
yeah, you
York.
were right
I
there.
was
Yeah,
right there.
yeah.
So many wasted days, right?
I
But so now I want to be in on it, and I'm learning my terminology, and I learn how to make costumes and makeup and all that stuff. But I felt like such a fraud because kids would be like, "Oh my gosh, Bernadette Peters and Gypsy," and I'd be like, "I understood one of those words, right?" You know, because you don't know because you downloaded the rapid version of it. So
yes,
you got to be able to be confident enough to sit in that space and say, I am relatively new to this. I downloaded this quickly. I'm super enthusiastic, and my enthusiasm will carry me through to learn the things in real time.
yes,
But if you're not used to that experience, it can be jarring enough to send you whing, popping right out of there. You know,
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
have a client who's really he's a high level curler. He does curling like in the Winter Olympics,
Uh-huh.
and he figured it out quickly. He's good at it. He's moving up the rankings. And then there was a particular technique that somebody taught him at a competition that he'd never heard of before. And he called me in a panic. He's like, I don't know this thing. I forget what it's called. They call it the Ottawa slide. Like, I don't know the Ottawa slide. Ergo, I'm not good at this. I'm like, buddy, hold
I should
on.
never curl again. Yeah, yeah,
Clearly, like I'm turning in my gear.
yeah.
And it's like, you know, I I'm a musical theater nerd. I've still never seen Cats. I know. I mean, like it's the most vicious of all revelations, but you know, I've seen Rent 6 times. That's got to count for something,
Red,
right?
awesome.
You know?
You actually mentioned in one of your webinars that one of your favorite phrases in therapy, I might be misquoting you, is like, don't let other people take up rent in your mind.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
And of course I started thinking about Rent and the Rent songs and exactly. So somewhat related to musical theater, at least in my brain, is queerness, because of course we know that many people in theater also in their wonderful creativity and open-mindedness also identify as queer, as do 42 to 69% of autistic minds. So I'm curious if you find that correlation in giftedness as well. Do many gifted people identify in the LGBTQ community?
Very much so. And in my initial exposure to the LGBT community was through theater. And I mean, once again, late 90s, where it was like, wait, you're gay. Like giant eyebrows up, like it's a whisper secret. Right. And I often tell this story, like, because once again, just like queer was used as an insult, so was the word gay. And
Right.
I remember in sophomore year, I started dating a girl from a rival high school, and somebody found out like, dude, that's so gay. And I was like,
Mm.
that is literally the opposite of the word. There are so many better words for stupid. Call me stupid. Like don't use the wrong word. Like it bothered me from a pedantry level, right?
It's yeah, yeah, yeah. That's your
Um,
giftedness. That is not the correct
yeah, if you're going to
definition.
insult me properly, gosh darn it. Um, but then I realized like these people are my friends, these people are my colleagues, these are people who are, the thing that matters most to me is I'm sharing this with them.
Mm.
And my journey into allyship started then. And
Mhm.
it's taken leaps and bounds. And, you know, and now it's part of my professional identity. I give a lot of talks on this. You know, I want to help people understand that that third E is often LGBTQ
Yeah.
for our kids, which means we are adding another complexity. We're adding another socially, vulnerable state of being,
Yeah.
and and it's the sort of thing where you part of being gifted is this strong sense of justice, right?
Yes.
It's like this
Yes.
endemic
Yes.
idea of like, I will fight the wrongs in the universe.
Yes.
And one of the kids I work with, he's like, he's like, how do I advocate for all the gay kids, all the queer kids, all the gifted kids, all the two? I'm like, but you gotta pass 7th grade first, dude. Like, I will
I
help
love it.
layer
I
that
love
in,
that
right?
passion.
You know,
Yes.
but I mean, it's like the kid makes me want to run through a wall for him, because it's like,
Yeah.
you forget, or it's easy to forget what it was like to be that young, and damn the torpedoes, right? So like, I tell parents in schools, it's like, if you have a highly gifted population, if you are serving neurodivergent learners, then you have to be prepared to serve LGBTQ kids. Otherwise, you're
Absolutely.
failing them, and you're not, and you're going to set yourself up to not meet their needs. And I had to walk away from a professional collaboration a couple of years ago, because he was not willing to follow me there. He said,
Mm,
that's against my beliefs. And I said, then you're in the wrong field,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's too
and
much crossover.
right.
Yeah.
I won't apologize for it. It's,
Yeah.
you know, believe what you want to believe. I'm not going to stop you from that. But if you want to serve these kids,
Yes.
then you got to leave that at the door. And if you can't, then find something else to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Which brings me to sex and intimacy in general. And in the clients I serve, mostly autism, ADHD, there's a lot of talk about sex and intimacy and sensory processing issues and challenges in focusing, and obviously some social aspects too. But I'm curious, because you teach sex ed for the gifted population, what are the special needs or accommodations that you find in that community related to sex and intimacy?
So part of the asynchronous development that takes place in neurodivergent learners, especially gifted learners, is a relative lag in social and emotional functioning.
Mm-hmm.
It tends to be on the lower end. I mean, obviously we're casting a wide net, but like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and if you think about the nuance that comes into sex, dating, intimacy, if you are socially asynchronous,
Mm-hmm.
and that's part of your neurodivergence, then you're setting yourself up for not only not being able to connect to people who want to be intimate with you, but potentially putting yourself in very dangerous situations.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a sex positive person, right? I want
Mm-hmm.
my clients to understand that sex is great. Big
Mm-hmm.
fan, 2 big thumbs up on that one, right? You know, yay, all the good stuff.
Right.
And also, right, if you are not reading those signals, you are potentially finding yourself in a dangerous situation. So, I always say, like, pray for rain, but dig a well, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
want my kids to be protected. I want my kids to have wonderful, affirming, positive, spectacular experiences, and also protect themselves against people who would do them harm. Right. And
Yes.
I think that is, given the social skills that are involved
Yeah.
in this, I think layering that into a good social emotional learning program is best practice.
That makes sense. I was talking to I'll name drop too. Ari, I was talking to Ari Tuckman, who wrote ADHD After Dark. We were talking about ADHD, sex and intimacy, and he was saying that it's not that, it's not that sexual trauma has caused ADHD at all. ADHD is more likely to put you in a situation where you might experience sexual trauma. And so have you found that too in the gifted population, that because of those nuances socially, that they find themselves in situations they weren't expecting, weren't anticipating, and weren't prepared for?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And given that gifted learners tend to seek intellectual peers, which tend
Mm-hmm.
to be older people,
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
wittingly or unwittingly, it opens you up to that. I mean, there was a case I was brought in to consult on a few years ago. Kid, 7th grade kid, brilliant musician. They accelerated him to the high school marching band. He's a talented music kid, put him with the other music kids. It makes sense. They're doing marching band. He's crushing it. They have a party. Who doesn't have
Yeah.
it's high school? They have a party, right? He got invited. His parents were thrilled. He never gets invited to parties. He goes to the party. Kids are playing spin the bottle, which I didn't know kids actually still played, but like, yeah, that's right. So they're playing spin the bottle, and he got super uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, no, it's fine, it's fine. Like, you don't have to play. Like, we're accommodating you, right? And that's fine. And then one of the kids at the party who had had a little bit too much to drink was like, I think you're so cute. I think we should date. And once again, no one had ever had that conversation with him
Right.
because they sort of assumed that he wasn't interested or he wasn't ready. And that's part of the old mindset of serving gifted and neurodivergent learners,
Yeah.
right? You know, because no one ever said this, he didn't have the skills. And he, they brought me in actually because the party got busted by the cops. So my 13-year-old client is in jail and he's like, help, because they put
Oh
him in
dear.
lockup. And,
Oh,
it was a whole thing.
yeah.
But he was much more traumatized, as it were, by the social sexual experiences
Sure.
rather than getting thrown in the back of a cruiser. Because he's
Interesting.
like, I know I didn't do anything wrong. I was just there. So,
Yes.
and of course he's saying to the cops, he's like, actually, our rights under the state of blank are, and the
He
kids
knows
like,
the
no,
law.
listen to this guy. He's the man, right?
On page 42 of your manual, you will see. Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm so glad we talked because I think I had a lot of biases against the term and what it meant and how it was perhaps used in schools to perpetuate mainly white wealthy privilege. So yeah, I'm very glad we had this conversation. And
Who's more
it's
privileged than me? I say, it's right. I mean, it's a thing. I want to dismantle it through the work I get to do.
yeah. Well, and what better podcast to do it on than neuroqueering, where the whole idea is to dismantle terms and social norms and to challenge structures and institutions and systems. So that's exciting to me. So yeah, I'm so happy we talked, and thank you. Is there anything else you want to leave us with, like how people can reach you, or you're like, no, don't reach me. I don't want you to reach out. Where can people follow your work?
Yes. I've hidden a series of clues somewhere on Reddit. No, I mean, you can track me down, www.drmattzakreski.com, Dr. Matt Zakreski. Punch me into Google. I pop up many
Punch you
places.
into Google. Yeah.
Punch me into Google. I do a lot of talks. So if you're hearing this, you're like, I think this is a message that my school organization needs to hear. By
Yeah.
all means, reach out. This is something that I've given to big corporations, homeschool collectives, and everything in between.
Yeah.
But the thing I leave you with is that your brain is a huge part of who you are. And it is never too late to understand how that brain works in terms of strengths, weaknesses, likes, and dislikes. The more you know, it's like reading your own operator's manual, right? So, if you're sitting here wondering, like, yeah, like that kind of sounds like me. I feel these things about these things, then contact me. And either I can help you do that or I'll point you at somebody who can, because it is never too late to know about yourself, because so much the core element of the work we both do is living your best life, your most authentic life. And
Yes.
a big part of that is understanding what's going on up here. So by all means,
Absolutely.
it's not too late to learn about that stuff, and we'll get you the support and accommodations you need, whether you're 6 or 62.
Love that. Yeah. I will second what Dr. Matt said, because I think a lot of us lack the experience of a sense of belonging in community, but also a sense of feeling aligned and integrated with our truest, most authentic selves. And so, yeah, never too late to do that, because that's, I feel like, a human desire um, and right, that we should find safe spaces to be completely ourselves and to understand ourselves and to be accepted. Yes.
Completely.
Yes. So good. Also, before we sign off, I'll be starting in the new year what I'm calling Neuro Community. So it's going to be an online community, including group coaching and co-working sessions, and this online ongoing weekly session. So check out my website for that. For those of you who are listening, pashamarlow.com. And I hope, Dr. Matt, that we cross paths in 3D or online sometime soon.
Oh, can we please? I would love that very much. And
Yeah, we
you know,
should go see cats. I mean, for real.
I won't.
Oh, you're like, I'm not singing cat.
Yes, at this point, I've gone too far, you know.
Then we shall produce a neurodivergent rent performance.
See, now, right? I mean, like now I'm in. Like, tell me all about it. You know, and I always joke that like the musical Be More Chill, which is like everybody I work with just in a singular musical. It actually premiered in the town I grew up in, Red Bank, New Jersey. So
Yes.
at the Two River Theater. So like when I find
Cool.
people who know that show, I'm like, it started where I started.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, so fun. All right. Well, thank you everybody for neuroqueering with us today, and we'll talk soon. Have a
Thank
good
you.
one. Bye.